Hello, internet friends. My name is Bay, and welcome back to the Shadowlands Alpha First Past, First Impressions coverage. We're in the Blood Death Knight territory now. DPS Death Knights, of course, will follow next, and then we'll do the wrap-up video. But yes, we made a female, light-forged Death Knight. Because what does lore mean in this game anymore? But who knows? Blood Death Knight is and has been a bit of a strange tank for a long time, either being incredibly powerful and mandatory, or the spec that you DPS DKs need to play when the situation calls for it. And I understand that. I get that. We had a touch about that today on stream. But they've had quite a number of baseline tweaks, and I would argue now they have maybe one, if not too many activatable cooldowns if you choose to spec into them. A little different if you're a DPS, when you have a lot of the cooldown-oriented button mashing. But for a tank, it feels a little okay. It gives you a lot of decision-making choices. I don't think any other tank has as many cooldowns, which, of course, we'll get into all of that. I have my huge note page over here ready to go. And of course, if you miss any of the previous testing, check the video description box down below. All of the testing is recorded on the channel guide, !guide in my Twitch chat, or in the description box, there is a bit.ly link for the channel guide. It has all of the testing VODs, all the dungeon videos, all of the full dungeon runs, because the dungeon footage I use for the wrap-up videos are obviously muted. So you can watch the actual video itself there when it was happening live, and everything else and the schedule therein. But that is not the important part today. If you, out there, oh dear viewer, use Amazon Prime and have a Twitch Prime token hooked up with your Twitch account, not just for me, this is a gentle nudge to remind you that those obviously are needs to be used every 30 days. They do not renew automatically. So if you would like to use your Twitch Prime sub on me, or on Preach, or on Nobble, or on Mr. GM, or on Taliesin Nevitel, or whatever content creator you enjoy, this is the nudge to go check your Twitch Prime account, hook up within your Twitch account, your Amazon Prime, Twitch account hookup, and use that sub and gift them. Because if you don't, then Amazon just takes your money and then your Twitch Prime sub goes nowhere. So go check that. I'll leave a link down below pinned if you have not heard of what this is, which I would venture guess where have you been on the internet, and are you Patrick Star living under a rock? But that's neither here nor there. Blood Death Knight. Whole lot of stuff to go over the Blood Death Knight here. A lot of baseline additions, a lot of small changes and things. Where to begin? Where to begin? Let's kind of rapid fire off some of the baseline ones here, or probably some of the most impactful changes for the Death Knight overall, which of course we'll be bringing up each individual time we talk about the DK, because they'll have different applications therein. But you have new Runeforges, Hysteria, Sanguination, Spell Warding, Apocalypse, and Unending Thirst. 5 new Runeforges. So potentially, you're not just going to set and forget Rune of the Fallen Crusader, like you have for how many expansions now? All of them, maybe, right? Unless you Stone Skin Gargoyle, but then you might get looked at funny in the Acarus community, like, ugh. Has a 4th arm coming out of his forehead or something. Maybe that's actually what you're into, because you're into ghouls and stuff like that. I don't know. How many of you Death Knights out there are actually to go with, like, not Necrolords? Night Fae Death Knights. I'm talking, yeah, bug DKs. Anyway. So Hysteria gives you 20 more maximum runic power, and your attacks have a chance. It's like, I think this was 3 times haste RPPM, to give you a buff that lasts for 8 seconds that increases the runic power generation by 20% when it's active. If it procs again, like any other Runeforge, it just immediately overrides the previous one and resets your 8 seconds to 8 seconds. But Rune of Hysteria looks pretty crazy for the Frost Death Knight, and maybe actually pretty crazy for the Blood DK. We do have some notes here that the Hysteria is working with all your other RP gens pretty much spot on. So say, for example, your Marrow-Rend, which is going to give you 20 runic power baseline, right? By default, using a rune gives you 10 runic power. So Mirror Rend during the Rune of Hysteria buff window gives you 24. And Heart Strike, because it gives you the 10 base for the 1 rune, plus the 5 additional. I currently have what is it called? Heartbreaker Talented. It does even impact the additional +2 per target. So if you're hitting your maximum of 5 targets where you'd get 10, you'll get 20% more, gaining you 12. It will round up the decimal, I think, on every interaction, because a Heart Strike during that window, I was told, gives 18. Additionally, that means that the weird interaction with Dancing Rune Weapons version of Heart Strike that just gives you 5 more, gives you 6 more. Huge pog. Even if it should just give you an actual Heart Strike amount, but it does work on all that. And that could stack with things like Ossuary, which is still really, really strong in giving you the potential to not necessarily 4 Death Strike back-to-back, but it is possible. I'm not going to do any Runeforge madness right now. I only have a Rune of Sanguination on currently. But you'll be able to build up to your new runic power cap, Death Strike, Heart Strike, Death Strike, Death Strike, Death Strike, which would be pretty, pretty cool. Not only for the healing potential there and the blood shield mitigation involved, but also the damage, which we'll get more into later. Because, yes, there are a lot of things tied to Death Strike on top of what already is that you might be already seeing. And again, in the description box down below, I'm going to leave a couple different GIFs or images of things we've had on the stream today of showing how things might work. A couple of my testing buddies, Calrel, shout out to you for helping me out doing this, who is part of the Acarus community as well, helping me out with all the testing here, has clipped and gifted a couple of different things to show. In particular, the next Runeforge we have here, Hysteria, or Hysteria, was Unending Thirst was a note we had to have here. 10% haste and movement speed, and heals you for 5% of your maximum health when you kill an enemy that wields experience or honor. And additionally, increases your movement speed while dead by 10%. So, dead Night Elf Death Knights? Sure. The haste and movement speed has to be the killing blow. It's not the killing blow window, it is the killing blow. And that'll all happen there. But this is a really neat, like Torghast, potentially, when you're soloing open world content Runeforge, maybe even potentially PvP, unsure. But that is the new Unending Thirst. You do have your Sanguination, which I have equipped here currently, which just starts off the discussion of, and your brain might go, ooh, Death Strike. But this affixes your weapon with a rune that causes your Death Strike to deal increased damage based on the target's missing health. It is a sort of 1-to-1 scaling ratio. If the target has 100% HP, you'll deal 0% additional damage with your Death Strike specifically. If the target has 0.1% HP remaining, your Death Strike will deal 99.9% more damage. So it's almost like it's a soft built-in execute. The lower health of the target, the more damage your Death Strike does. In the dungeon footage, which if you want to watch the full dungeon video, link down below. Word Up was in the video, in the dungeon with me today. We were having a whole bunch of goofy stuff about tank damage, and I was doing, no healer dungeon parts where no one healed me to see how long I could live. And lo and behold, Blood Death Knight's pretty good at doing that. But the extra part of Rune of Sanguination, on top of giving you damage, is that when you fall below 35% health, you will heal for 48% of your maximum health over the following 8 seconds. This has a 5-minute cooldown. So there is not only Rune of Sanguination for Blood Decay, there's also still Will of Necropolis, which is the 30% DR when you're under 30% health. Now, this would activate at 35, but if you, say, went down below 30% health in one fell swoop, your Rune would activate, if it's off cooldown, right? 5-minute cooldown. And you'd be in the Will of the Necropolis window while you're healing up a huge amount. And that could even interact with Purgatory in some way, where you'd have to be obviously right above 35% and then take a killing blow to kill you, where Purgatory would activate. And then for 3 seconds, obviously the healing absorption remains, you would die. But Rune of Sanguination would possibly counteract that, but you're going to counteract that with hopefully Death Striking. So this is a really cool rune. I had some pretty chonk Death Strikes in the dungeon. I believe my highest crit was almost 3,200, which is easily the heaviest hitting attack on the entire kit for the Blood Death Knight without even contest. And yes, of course, that was with the Hemostasis stacks, which we'll get into a little bit more in a moment here. The additional one, Rune of Spell Warding. This is going to be 3% deflecting magic damage. And there's a bit of an internal cooldown on the 10%. Yeah, it has a chance to create a shield that absorbs magic equal to 10% of your maximum health. This, with an ICD, could be potentially gamed with things like Vampiric Blood to give you a larger spell shield. But it is essentially a proc for a blue anti-magic barrier here. And this will help you deal with magic damage, of course, if that's the heaviest part you're dealing with. And then when the enemy damages the shield, their cast speed will be reduced by 10% for 6 seconds. Not sure how this will work in PvE endgame raid content, but a lot of attack speed and casting speed slows are coming back to World of Warcraft, so this could debuff raid bosses. Could be pretty huge. And Apocalypse is the last one here. This one probably doesn't have any use with the Blood Death Knight. It's essentially the passive from the Apocalypse ghoul tree that the Unholy Death Knight had back in the day in Legion, where there are multiple debuffs that your ghoul can apply, which is the healing reduction, the increased damage taken from the Death Knight, the reduced damage taken to the Death Knight, or the slow the target and does a damage over time dot. This could be awesome for having this back on Unholy, because they have Apocalypse and Arming the Dead reactions and cooldown reduction stuff and all of this kind of thing. Obviously, it's a little RNG, but it's very flavorful, so maybe it'll actually work out in the end. I'm not sure. Each ghoul sort of gets one of these, if I recall. We'll see. There was talk about Fallen Crusader still being too strong, but they may nerf this or buff the other ones. I think it may be a cut the strength proc down to maybe 12 to 10%, but we'll see. We'll see how that works out. That's the biggest thing. And of course, I'll summarize this on the next two DK videos as well, because there's some big changes there in the Runeforges. You do, of course, have Anti-Magic Zone back as a Death Knight. It is across the entire class. It has no cast animation right now, which is kind of weird. 2-minute cooldown, 10-second duration, 20% magic damage DR while in the purple dome of safety. You do have Lichborn, a new version of Lichborn here. And I definitely did some Lichborn shenanigans within the dungeon if you want to go see that, where you pulled a bunch of mobs and I popped Lichborn, and I had the Voracious Leech window, and I popped Bone Storm. So I had 25% leech, because what Lichborn does on a 2-minute cooldown for 10 seconds makes you immune to Charm, Fear, and Sleep, but also increases your leech by 10%, which is a lot. It turned you into a bit of it kind of bring back that consumption window, but only on you. And there's utility baked in there to just use it as an additional leech window where you can combine it with just Vamp Blood, for example. And again, you're going to get into this seeing how many other ability cooldowns you have. I was also given and suggested a macro because it turns you undead. Lichborn does. So it draws upon the unholy energy to become undead for 10 seconds. You can make a macro that has existed for a very long time where you can death coil yourself. The question is, if that will be worth it, who knows? So hitting the macro over here, I actually moved it off of my hotbar because I didn't want to immediately death coil myself. You can do immediate death coils into it's such a bad graphic. But you can death coil yourself during that window of time. Because Death Coil is also baked in baseline to the Death Knight now. And it does heal an undead ally for a ton of health. A ton of health. But it's still going to be less than a Death Strike. But there's potential there where maybe like in PvP, if you're PvP tanking as a PvP tanking as a flag carrier, and you can't always hit somebody, or you're currently taunt swapping off of your co-tank and you can't death strike because you have to run away, Star Augur style. There's something there. I think more so it'll be used with like the shenanigans I said before, like the Voracious Leech window and Bone Storm. So Bone Storm obviously heals you for the 3% of maximum health per time it ticks up to the 5 target cap. But then you can make the damage it deals also heal you with Leech, which is just a huge extra benefit, right? To combine that whole self-healing nature to it. Or just having an on-demand extra 10% leech with your Vampiric Bloods. Either way it works, right? There's something else there. Overall, other baseline things, we see Chains of Ice there. So you have the additional utility to slow targets with Chains of Ice out of range. I can't hit that target. That one's immune for some reason. And that one's also immune. This one isn't. Because sure, they're both training dummies, but dummies be dummies. So you have your additional Chains of Ice there. Of course, it does cost that 1 rune. And it still is a huge 70% snare, which tanks usually have the biggest snares. But that brings back in the potential for, you know, grip chains combinations to bring back that utility for the Blood Death Knight. You also are going to see Raised Dead down here in the corner. There he is. Your Risen Ghoul baseline is just going to attack your target. He just goes and smacks them. But baseline again, it will attack for 1 minute. There is a bit of feedback point going on because it takes like a 3-ish second cast time with the animation for it to start attacking, that it should just last 63 seconds. Not a minute, so you don't lose time. But it is a soft DPS cooldown, so you can bind it with your Dancing Rune weapon to get in there and do some of that extra DPS on the pull or wherever else, right? Because you have something else auto-attacking while you're also attacking. So a little bit of something else happening in the DPS category for the Blood Death Knight. Even if Dancing Rune weapon, I'm not going to go into it in this video. Dancing Rune weapon is still a complete mess on what its interactions are, but if you play a Blood Death Knight, you know. You know that. Oh, I am recording now. So not right now. No dungeon run for me. Thanks, though. The additional thing you're going to see here is Heartstrike's getting a rank 2, or rank 3, I guess, where they get 20% more damage in your Heartstrike. Sure. Vampiric Blood is getting a new rank, where you increase the healing and absorb by an additional 5%, so it'll go up to 35%, and it lasts for 2 more seconds. You're also getting Blood Tap back, which I wanted to get all the baseline-y things, and then just, if you've seen it in the spellbook, obviously you know what's happening. Blood Tap is coming back. There it is. 1 minute recharge, max 2 charges, immediately gives you a rune back. And a recharge time is reduced by 2 seconds whenever a Bone Shield charge is consumed. Bone Shield can be consumed every 2.5 seconds, I was told. So the overall recharge of Blood Tap, if you're taking damage and tanking, will not actually be that long. And that'll be able to sync up potential uses of the baseline Rune Tap, which is 25-second recharge for 20% DR for 4 seconds, 1 rune cost, 2 max charges. This, however, currently is on the GCD, whereas Blood Tap is off the GCD. So both being off, I'm not sure it's going to happen. I think Rune Tap, you basically have to pick which one that Blizzard might change to whatever order. But this being on, considering it's a little bit weaker than the talented version on live right now. I believe the talented version is 30% DR, still also 4 seconds. But the ability to on-demand synergize with Blood Tap and funnel to Rune Tap, or save double Blood Tap charges for obviously a Marrow Rend when you need to accelerate the pace of the class, the spec SO, is that you have that potential there. We're going to run over here to this elite mob here so we can start doing some getting hit in the face things for the next little section. There are a lot of buttons on the Blood Death Knight, as you see on the hotbar there. There's a lot of new, and not everything is talented, right? But I just put it all down there for the overall effect. There's a big old elite cat up here we're going to go fight. So, Blood Tap returning off the GCD, Rune Tap being baseline. Tombstone moves, which I still think it should move again. We had a lot of good conversation today that Bloodworms should be up here, because Heartbreaker and Blood Drinker are both DPS and healing talents, and so is Bloodworms. Death Pack should probably be just completely blasted off the face of the earth and removed from the Blood Death Knight, and something else should go here, because this is a trap talent. Mark of Blood, got a buff. It does no longer cost any runic power. It's also 3% instead of 2% health, which is pretty cool. Other little things that have been buffed. This is a scaling thing, but Bone Shield now is scaling with 50% of your strength, and up from 40% of your strength. That's a nice one. What else is my notes here? Let's see. Oh yeah, Rune Strike is gone. It's a leveling ability that turns into Death Strike, we think. So no more Rune Strike, as you see. That's totally gone from your talent calculator here. But that's again why I think Tombstone should probably be in the 30 tier, maybe. It felt good. I use it in the dungeon. But Blood Drinker and Heartbreaker and Bloodworms all do damage and healing components. And we'll see. Wraithwalk is still a talent down here. Anti-Magic Barrier got buffed. Its CDR improved to 20 seconds off, up from 15, and the duration and the absorb increased to 40 seconds, up from 30 seconds. So with Anti-Magic Barrier and your new Runeforge of Spell Warding, I know it's like a weird misnomer in the tanking community that the Blood Death Knight is like the magic tank. And yes, but no. But I don't know. Spell Warding and Anti-Magic Barrier and Anti-Magic Zone, you know, it lends itself, it creates its own narrative where you could possibly, if the boss is very, you know, magic damage forward and that's the way you need to approach the current progression you're currently on, or if there's even Mythic Plus dungeons that have lots of caster nonsense in it, right? Casters and magic damage have always been the scary part for tanks in general, and if you've watched the Brewmaster Monk video recently, they can't even stagger magic anymore currently, right? In alpha currently. It may come back. And your Blood Shield is only physical damage absorption. Obviously, your Death Strike window will heal you based off of the damage you take from magic damage, which is still 25% in the last 5, or a minimum of 7% of your max HP. So there is that. But this tier looks really good. I was told that the Mark of Blood not costing anything, and you could put 2 Mark of Bloods up, makes it potentially pretty good. On live right now, what does it cost? It costs a bajillion. It costs 30 runic power, and it competes with Voracious and Bloodworms, which Bloodworms just do damage. So why would you put Mark of Blood down there? Which is again why Bloodworm should be up at the top, and then that gives you cool talents to pick when you turn, well, level 15 in this case. I think DK started at level 8 in the new leveling experience. But the last couple of notes here I have are Rapid Decomposition also got buffed. It has, and additionally, your Blood Plague leeches 50% more health. And as I went over a little earlier, you don't have an AoE cap on your Blood Boil. All mobs within 10 yards, you can be infected. So Rapid Decomposition might even come into play on like big AoE fights where you just want constant trickle healing or something like that, or a Mythic Plus pulls to combat necrotic in some way. There's little things there. Consumption also got buffed. It's a 8 target cap, however, but it's 150% of the healing of the gives you 100% of the damage you deal, and it's 300 per target hit with 8. But it has no interaction with Blood Shield. It has no interaction with like a Death Strike style mechanic. But it could work with the Voracious window, and of course you have the Lichborn window as well, that you could stack 25% leech and consumption, so it heals you for the damage it deals, and the damage it deals will leech. There's something there. There's something there. Relish in Blood is the new talent that also shouldn't probably be in this row. It's whenever Crimson Scourge activates, which is going to be your proc for D&D. It will heal you based on your Bone Shield charges and give you the 10 runic power that the free D&D does not give you, which is nice. It might be, you'll have to be a little stronger to be competitive. I totally missed over this earlier. You also are getting Sacrificial Pact for more damage and healing components, where you can actually summon, and it's on cooldown now so you can see it again. Summon ghouls off the GCD, but Sacrificial Pact, where you blow your ghoul up for some shadow damage to 8 nearby enemies and heals you for 25% of your maximum health on a 2-minute cooldown, is on the GCD. But that still means you can macro it together where you can summon your ghoul and even in its animation blow him up and immediately heal yourself, which is way better of a cooldown than Death Pact, which again, that's why it's a trap talent. But I'm going to sort of spec the build that I think may see a lot of oomph, which we are currently spec'd outside of Voracious, which also got buffed. And this brings me to Death Strike as a short note here. So, Red Thirst also got buffed. It's now 1.5 seconds of CDR for every 10 runic power, up from 1. And then you saw Bone Storm a little earlier. I don't know if I mentioned it. It's at 8 target caps for damage, but 5 for healing, because it only heals you for 3% per target hit up to 15. But again, with the fact that you have more leech, does that really even matter? And the notes I have on the bottom. Hemostasis does not affect your blood shield. However, the new Voracious does. Voracious is a 20% increase on Deathstrike's base healing. That means it's a 30% damage window scale that looks for instead of 25, and it's 10% of your maximum health as the minimum heal, which does mean that your blood shields will be stronger baseline, or potentially stronger based on the sort of snapshot window being higher. Whereas Hemostasis, doing the blood boil hits, increase your damage and healing done by your next death strike by 8%, that does not increase your blood shield, because it doesn't affect the base amount. It's a buff after the fact, but that affects the damage, which also stacks with Sanguination. So a lot of good damage there. But the Heartbreaker, Hemostasis, Ossuary, we can grab whatever you want in your 35 tier. You can grab whatever you want in your 40 tier. Voracious, also the Leech from Voracious procs on the Death Strike that you cast first. And then Red Thirst is going to be potentially really strong in the I'm going to live forever and heal myself for a whole lot all the time, and do increased damage to targets as they get lower in health. Put a Mark of Blood up, why not? This isn't a new elite mob that's sitting right here, so it's an at-level elite. I'm also using an at-cast target macro for my Death and Decay procs. But building up and big Death Strikes back-to-back. Probably not hitting my Blood Boil as often as possible here, because I don't have my heads-up display for that. So big Death Strike coming in. Blah, 1,200 damage. The base damage of Death Strike, to put that in perspective there, is only 600 before armor. And that was a double damage with armor being impacted because of Hemostasis and the back end of the Sanguination Rune. And of course, the Death Strike healing, as you see here, this guy is going nowhere. This big little 50 elite. Obviously, it'll take you a while to kill him and wiggle him down, but you've got nothing here. I'll put up some combat log here so you can see the actual numbers if you would like to see those. But if Hemostasis will not give me any of that. Let's pop that down. This guy's got nothing. But big 13, 15 blood shield right there. Back to back. We can add to it. We're at 2172, up to 3,000 blood shield. So, and every single time, we can let the Voracious window go away. But if you watch, and I'll pause the log for a moment, that Death Strike right there, I'm at full health. He needs to actually do damage to me. Let me sit down real quick. Sit. Okay, roar. Thank you. Sit. Thank you. Sit. Thank you. Sit. If you're sitting down, you get crit automatically. Okay, now I have HP deficit. There's too much healing, man. But again, the Voracious window, boom. The Death Strike hits. The Death Strike heals. And the Death Strike leeches, all on the same button. It does not have to require a follow-up, because the Voracious Leech, I guess, applies as you cast the spell, but there's a momentary delay on when the actual hit happens. But there's going to be some fun stuff. Again, check out the dungeon video itself for me doing some crazy stuff with the Voracious window, Bone Storm, and, of course, being Lichborn, which, again, yeah, look at my giant chin. Whatever. The Blood Decay has a lot of things. A lot of things. Maybe even too many things. A lot of buttons. You add Tombstone into that whole thing. Maybe even Blood Drinker, another button. You add Consumption, another button. You add Relish in Blood, which may give you a proc, but probably give Ossuary or you know, Foul Bulwark being a thing. You've got no Death Pact. But you got factor in Bone Storm there as well, too. There's a lot of conditional buttons for the Blood Death Knight. But let me know what your thoughts are down below on this quite changed and updated spec. Again, mine has been Bay. If you would like to help me out here on YouTube, check the description box below, of course, for the links relative to everything else. And, of course, check out the Twitch Prime if you have a Twitch Prime link. But I will see you all in the next Alpha First Pass, First Impressions video. We've got the DPS Death Knight's coming up next.